All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely upend something you've probably believed your entire life. Seriously, we're diving into the deeply ingrained myths surrounding self-esteem, ego, and aggressive behavior. We've got a really fascinating array of data and psychological research to get through, and I can promise you this. By the end of our time today, you're going to look at the people around you in a completely different way. So let's just jump right in with a quick, revealing psychological thought exercise. Okay, I want you to take a second and picture the absolute most aggressive, hostile, or just plain toxic person you know, or maybe someone you've encountered in the past. You got them in your mind? Good. Now ask yourself, how would you describe their inner life? Like, do you honestly think they secretly suffer from low self-esteem? Because society has totally trained us to assume that bullies and highly aggressive folks are secretly shy, modest, full of self-doubt, or, just overcompensating for a super fragile self-concept. We're always told they push others down because they feel so low about themselves, right? Well, hold on to the image of that person in your head because we're going to look at what actual clinical research says about them. So, when we look at the data, there is a stark contrast between the actual traits of low self-esteem and the traits of the highly aggressive people we typically run into. People with genuinely low self-esteem, they're usually shy, modest, compliant, and pretty self-doubting. They lack confidence, and frankly, they often just go along with whatever others want. But on the flip side, highly narcissistic individuals are bold, assertive, arrogant, and fundamentally entitled. Now think back to that toxic person from our thought exercise. Which profile do they actually fit into? Yeah, almost certainly the latter. Highly aggressive people don't lack self-worth at all. They are absolutely bursting with an inflated, grandiose view of themselves. And hey, if we step back from personal anecdotes and just look at history, this pattern is incredibly obvious. I mean, consider the most violent, aggressive conquerors the world has ever seen. Take Genghis Khan, for example. His military force acquired the largest contiguous empire in history. And he didn't sit around saying, "Oh, I hope I'm worthy of this." No, he proclaimed, "With heaven's aid, I have conquered for you a huge empire, but my life was too short to achieve the conquest of the world." The guy literally felt entitled to rule the entire globe. You can look at all sorts of historical figures who initiated massive purges and wars. They definitely did not suffer from low self-esteem. They put themselves way above the law, above religious figures, and honestly above humanity itself. Their egos were just astronomical. This brilliantly illustrates the daily engine of what psychologists call narcissistic self-enhancement, or sometimes grandiosity. And it basically manifests as this intense obsession with agentic traits, so things like power, dominance, intelligence. But at the exact same time, they have zero interest in communal traits like warmth, agreeableness, or basic morality. They honestly do not care about being genuinely liked. They only care about being admired or feared. They love maintaining these flashy, materialistic public images. They'll treat romantic partners not as equals, but as human trophies to boost their own status. And working in a group with them, forget about it. They are completely unable to share the spotlight, often just exploiting their teammates so they can claim all the personal glory for themselves. Now, this sheer desperation to appear superior actually leads to some frankly hilarious behaviors when you put them in psychological testing. Have you ever met someone who pretends to know absolutely everything about a topic they clearly know nothing about? Well, researchers tested this using something called the overclaiming phenomenon. They gave participants a list of historical events, scientific facts, academic terms, and asked them to rate their knowledge. But here's the catch. The researchers completely made up some of the items on the list, just totally fabricated them. And the highly narcissistic participants, they jumped right at the opportunity to self-enhance. They confidently claimed to possess deep expertise on completely bogus subjects that didn't even exist. They are just so desperate to be the smartest person in the room that they'll proudly declare their vast knowledge of absolute fiction. So the big question is, why do they do this? Like, why are they so compelled to shove their self-perceived greatness in everybody else's faces? In psychology, there's actually a pretty fierce debate between two models. The older clinical model suggests this behavior is basically just a defense mechanism. It argues that underneath all that bragging is a fragile, insecure inner child who's just terrified of being unloved. But modern research, particularly using tests designed for normal populations, paints a wildly different picture. The modern data suggests these folks aren't cautiously protecting some hidden vulnerability at all. Actually, it's more like they're addicts. They are absolutely hooked on the sheer pleasure of feeling superior to everyone else, and they will swing for the fences to get that fix of admiration, totally unbothered by who they have to step on to get it. To really get this, understanding the timeline of this psychological myth is absolutely vital. See, for decades, we had this intuitive belief that negative self-views cause negative behavior. The logic was, if you feel bad, you do bad things. Makes sense, right? And in the 1990s, this idea just exploded into the self-esteem movement. Boosting self-esteem became this magic cure-all for literally every social ill, from bad grades to violent crime. But then, in 1996, researchers did some really comprehensive reviews of the data. And guess what? They found zero empirical evidence linking low self-esteem to aggression. None at all. All those programs designed to boost self-esteem, they didn't do a thing to reduce violence. Fast forward to today, and rigorous modern data proves the exact opposite. Inflated egos, not deflated ones, are the primary drivers of hostility. If you're wondering how this myth got so twisted in the first place, just take a look at the summary of these laboratory tests. When you hand people with genuinely low self-esteem a questionnaire, they actually claim to have high hostility. They'll freely admit, yeah, I feel angry or frustrated. But when you put them in an actual lab setting, like a test where they have the option to punish a competitor by blasting them with painful white noise through headphones, their objective, actual aggression is incredibly low. They don't actually want to hurt anyone. Now, flip that and look at highly narcissistic individuals. On paper, they claim to be perfectly adjusted and report super low hostility, mostly because they want to look good. But in the lab, when given the chance to actually inflict pain, they crank that dial right up and deliver incredibly high levels of objective aggression. The takeaway here is huge. You can't just listen to what people say about themselves. You have to watch what they actually do. Now, I should mention, researchers haven't completely thrown out the idea that hidden insecurities might play some role, which brings us to a really fascinating concept called the donut theory. Okay, picture a donut. It's got this sugary, substantial, solid exterior, but right in the middle, totally empty. The donut theory suggests that some highly aggressive people possess high explicit self-esteem, meaning they consciously think and loudly say they are absolutely amazing. But if you measure their implicit or unconscious self-esteem using these rapid-fire word association tests, their core is completely empty. It's a total mismatch. They project this intense, aggressive self-assurance on the outside, but they completely lack a solid, unconscious foundation of genuine self-worth on the inside, which makes them incredibly volatile. But here's the thing. Whether we're talking about a pure narcissist or someone with that donut profile, grandiosity all by itself isn't quite enough to trigger violence. The data actually points to a very specific psychological formula for aggression. Step 1, the individual has to have grandiose narcissistic traits, basically that baseline constant need for dominance. Step 2, they must possess high conscious self-esteem. Believe it or not, research shows that if you take a highly narcissistic person and their self-esteem actually drops, their aggression drops right along with it. It's the combination of narcissism and high self-regard that's so dangerous. And then we get to step 3, the catalyst, a severe ego threat or some form of public humiliation. That trigger, threatened egotism, is literally the match in the powder barrel. Aggression absolutely explodes when a massively inflated ego is suddenly punctured by failure, criticism, or disrespect. To prove this, researchers set up this brilliant naturalistic study. They had college students compete in tasks, but they sneakily manipulated the game so that the highly arrogant participants ended up losing. Then, to really trigger deep humiliation, they showed the participant their name ranked at the very bottom of a list, right below an opponent who was supposedly from a fiercely hated rival college sports team. And the result? Just pure, unadulterated narcissistic rage. It wasn't the feeling of being inherently worthless that caused them to lash out. It was the intolerable sting of having their supreme, untouchable greatness questioned by actual reality. As we kind of wrap up this psychological profile, I think it's really important to look at the long-term trajectory of an aggressive, inflated ego. Because honestly, it almost always ends in a deeply ironic downfall. Because they lack basic empathy, sure, they might be super charming at first glance, but they rapidly alienate their peers and essential allies over time. I mean, their teamwork is just disastrous. Plus, because their fragile ego demands that they constantly shift blame onto everyone else for their own failures, they literally never learn from their mistakes. They rely on the same rigid, tone-deaf self-promotion in every single room they walk into, whether it fits the vibe or not. And ultimately, this incredibly short-sighted, aggressive quest for absolute superiority completely sabotages their social capital, and they end up losing the exact admiration they so desperately crave.